Commander Gina Park stood alone in the memorial hall of the Earth flagship Indomitable *. The room was cold and quiet except for the soft hum of the holographic display. The blue light painted shadows across her face as she stared at the image of Valoran Prime. Her dark uniform seemed to absorb the light, making her appear almost like a shadow herself. 3 weeks ago, Valoran Prime had been a beautiful world of blue oceans and green-gold continents. The Valorans, tall six-armed beings with smooth silver skin, had built gleaming cities that rose like crystal forests from the landscape. Now, those cities were gone. Black scars covered the planet where Krell bombs had fallen. Smoke still rose from some areas, visible even from space. 3 weeks, Gina whispered. Her fingers reached out to touch the outline of Valora's capital city, now nothing but ruins. The hologram sparked around her fingertips but did not change. The destruction was real, recorded by Earth's scout ships just days ago. Gina had visited Valoran Prime 5 years earlier. The Valorans had welcomed her warmly. They had shared meals with her, shown her their art, taught her about their history. The Valorans had been humanity's first alien friends, meeting Earth ships with peace offerings 50 years ago. They had taught humans how to travel faster than light, opening the stars to Earth. Without them, humanity would still be trapped in their home system. And now, they were nearly gone. Heavy footsteps broke the silence. Admiral Lee approached from behind, his reflection appearing in the polished floor. His weathered face looked older in the blue glow of the hologram. Deep lines creased his forehead and the corners of his eyes. "The council session begins in 5 minutes, Commander," he said, his voice low and rough. Gina straightened her back and turned to face her superior. "I'll be there, sir." Admiral Lee paused, looking at the hologram. "Did you lose anyone you knew?" "The ambassador's son," Gina said quietly. "He was studying to be a doctor. He wanted to specialize in human medicine." Her voice caught slightly. "He was brilliant, kind." The Admiral nodded once, then gestured toward the door. "Then let's make sure his death means something." They walked together through the long corridors of the Indomitable at 1,200 meters long. The flagship was the largest warship ever built by human hands. Its halls were wide and tall, designed to accommodate both human crews and their taller Valoran allies. Now those spaces seemed empty, a constant reminder of who was missing. The war room doors slid open as they approached. Inside, 30 men and women sat around a large circular table. Each wore the uniform of their respective Earth nation or colony, but all bore the same silver pin on their collars, the Earth United symbol, adopted after first contact with the Valorans, had finally united humanity. Conversation stopped as Admiral Lee and Commander Park entered. Gina took her seat while the Admiral remained standing at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming," Admiral Lee began. "The situation is grave. 3 weeks ago, the Krell Imperium launched a surprise attack against Valoran Prime and its 7 colony worlds. The attack came without warning or declaration of war." He touched a control pad, and the hologram of ruined Valoran Prime appeared above the table. Several council members gasped. Some looked away. "Valoran orbital defenses were destroyed within the first hour," Lee continued. "Ground forces held out for 3 days before their final communication centers went silent. From 8 billion Valorans across their worlds, we estimate fewer than 500 million survived. Most of those are refugees who escaped on civilian ships." "Why?" asked General Kim, his face pale. "Why would the Krell do this? The Valorans have never threatened anyone." "Resources," said Admiral Lee. "The Krell are a silicon-based hive species. They need certain minerals for reproduction that are abundant on Valoran worlds. They'd been expanding for centuries, consuming planets, and moving on. The Valorans knew this, which is why they reached out to other species like us, hoping to build alliances strong enough to deter the Krell. But the Krell struck first," said Colonel Ba, a thin woman with sharp eyes. before the alliance was strong enough. Yes, Admiral Lee nodded. They believed the Valorans would stand alone. They believed Earth would not risk confrontation with a superior force. His eyes narrowed. They miscalculated. Humanity does not abandon its allies. Gina looked around the table. The fear was visible on many faces, but there was something stronger too. Determination, anger, resolve. The Valorans had been Earth's teachers, guides to the stars, friends. Their near extinction had struck deep into humanity's heart. "What do we know about Krell military capabilities?" asked Commander Song, a tactical specialist. "They outnumber us 5-1 in ships," Admiral Lee admitted. "Their technology is advanced, particularly their quantum shielding. But they have weaknesses. Their hive mind makes them predictable. They can't adapt quickly to new situations. And," he paused, "the Valorans gave us something before they fell." The room grew silent. "Data on experimental weapons technology," Lee continued. "Something that might pierce Krell shields. Our scientists are working on it now." "Even so," said General Park, "an attack would be risky. We could lose everything." "And what would we be saving?" Gina found herself speaking up. All eyes turned to her. "If we let this stand, if we hide while our friends die, what kind of humanity survives? The Valorans gave us the stars. We owe them more than fear." Admiral Lee nodded to her, then addressed the room. "I propose an immediate military response against Krell forces, a strike to show them that attacking our allies means facing Earth as well." He looked at each face around the table. All those in favor. Gina watched as hands rose around the table, some quickly, some slowly, but in the end, not a single hand remained lowered. The vote was unanimous. Earth would fight. The deep hum of machines filled the research lab on Deck 7 of the Indomitable Asterisk. Blue light pulsed from screens and testing chambers, casting moving shadows across the walls. Commander Gina Park walked through the sliding doors, her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. The air smelled of ozone and hot metal. Dr. Tak didn't look up when she entered. The scientist was bent over his console, his back curved like a question mark. His fingers moved quickly over the holographic controls, pushing, pulling, and reshaping the light. Numbers and diagrams flowed across his screens too fast for Gina to follow. "Dr. Tak," she said, "Admiral Lee sent me for an update." The scientist jumped slightly, then turned. A wide smile broke across his tired face. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, and his lab coat had coffee stains down the front. "Commander," perfect timing. He gestured excitedly toward a sealed chamber where a blue cylinder floated in a magnetic field. The device pulsed with inner light, almost like a heartbeat. "Project Sunspear is ready for deployment." Gina stepped closer, studying the device through the clear walls of the chamber. It was smaller than she expected, perhaps a meter long and 20 centimeters wide. The surface seemed to shift and move like water, though it was clearly solid. "The Valoran archives yielded results?" she asked. Tak nodded eagerly, running a hand through his messy hair. Their ancient texts described theoretical weaponry that could disrupt quantum shields. "Look here." He pulled up images of strange symbols and diagrams on his screen. "These are from Valoran records over 2,000 years old. They studied quantum shield technology, but never built weapons to counter it because they were a peaceful species." "But we're not," Gina said quietly. "No," Tak agreed, his smile fading slightly. "We're not. The Krell have relied on their invulnerability for too long. Their ships are surrounded by quantum fields that shift anything trying to penetrate them into another dimensional state. That's why our weapons pass right through them without causing damage. And Sunspear can break through." Tak's eyes lit up again. "Better than that. It doesn't just penetrate the shields. It turns them against the ships they protect. The quantum field collapses inward instead of outward. The Krell will be destroyed by their own protection." Gina stared at the pulsing cylinder. "How many do we have?" 12, Tak said. Enough for our largest ships. We're working on more, but the materials are rare. Will it be enough? Jinnah asked. Tak's confidence wavered. I don't know, but it's not our only advantage. He led Jinnah through a side door into a larger room. Here, 20 men and women sat in circular patterns on the floor. Their eyes were closed, and their hands were linked. In the center of each circle stood a strange device that emitted a soft humming noise. Lieutenant Hannah moved between the circles, speaking quietly to each group. She was small, with short hair and intense eyes. When she saw Jinnah, she nodded and walked over. Commander, she said with a slight bow. These are the telepaths, Jinnah asked, keeping her voice low. Hannah nodded. The best Earth has. Most humans have only trace telepathic abilities, just enough to sense emotions from those very close to us. But these people are different. They can reach further, sense more, and they can affect the Krell. We believe so, Hannah said. The Krell's silicon-based hive mind has one critical weakness. It's never encountered the unpredictable patterns of human consciousness. Their minds are connected like a computer network, efficient but rigid. Hannah gestured to the circles of people. They think in straight lines, she explained. We think in spirals. Random, emotional, creative. We're training our telepaths to project that chaos into the Krell network. Jinnah watched as one circle of telepaths suddenly gasped together, then laughed. The device in their center flashed brightly. What happened? She asked. Hannah smiled. They just overloaded the test system. Good sign. Jinnah wasn't entirely convinced. Will it be enough to matter in battle? By itself? No, Hannah admitted. But combined with Sunspear and our tactical advantages, it might tip the balance. The Krell don't understand us, Commander. They've never faced an enemy like humans before. Jinnah thanked her and returned to the main lab. Dr. Tak was supervising as technicians carefully moved the first Sunspear device into a transport container. When can they be installed? Jinnah asked. We start tonight, Tak said. 3 days to complete all 12 ships. We've modified the main weapon systems to channel the Sunspear energy. Later on the bridge, Jinnah stood beside Admiral Lee as they reviewed the star charts. The screen showed their current position and the bright red nebula that marked the edge of Krell territory. 3 days until we reach the nebula, Admiral Lee said. Will we be ready? Sunspear will be installed by then, Jinnah confirmed. The telepaths are training around the clock. The Admiral nodded. Good. The fleet is as prepared as we can make it. Over the next 3 days, the crew of the Indomitable worked without rest. Shuttles moved constantly between ships, carrying equipment and specialists. In the weapons bay, engineers crawled through access tunnels, rewiring systems to accommodate the new technology. Jinnah spent hours watching the installation teams. The Sunspear devices had to be perfectly aligned with the main guns, their energy fields carefully balanced. One mistake could destroy the ship when the weapon fired. At night, when most of the crew slept, Jinnah would visit the telepath's chamber. Lieutenant Hannah and her team practiced late into the night, pushing themselves to exhaustion. They had set up a simulation of Krell communication patterns, trying again and again to disrupt it. They're killing themselves, Jinnah said to Dr. Tak on the 3rd night. The scientist nodded tiredly. We all are. But what choice do we have? On the final day, Jinnah stood on the observation deck, looking out at the fleet. 43 Earth warships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the starlight. 12 of them, including the Indomitable now carried Sunspear weapons. The other ships would provide support and draw Krell fire. The red nebula grew larger ahead of them, its gases swirling like blood in water. Somewhere beyond it waited the Krell, still unaware that Earth was coming to avenge their fallen allies. Jinnah touched the Valoran friendship bracelet on her wrist. It had been a gift from the ambassador's son, now dead with billions of his people. She closed her eyes and made a silent promise to him. "Fleet is approaching Nebula Boundary," announced the navigation officer. "All ships report Sunspear systems online." Admiral Lee's voice came over the ship-wide channel. "All personnel to battle stations. We enter Krell territory in 30 minutes. The time for preparation was over. The time for vengeance had begun." A flash of blue light tore open the darkness of space. The Earth flagship Indomitable pushed through the hyperspace window, its massive hull gleaming in the starlight. Behind it came more flashes as 42 other warships emerged, forming a perfect attack formation. The fleet had arrived at Krell Outpost Gamma 9. Commander Gina Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. Through the main view screen, she could see their target. Krell Outpost Gamma 9 floated against the backdrop of a red gas giant planet. The station was enormous, a spinning crystalline structure that looked like a giant snowflake made of glass and metal. Around it moved 20 or more angular warships, their black hulls gleaming like polished obsidian in the red light of the planet. "All ships report successful emergence from hyperspace," called out the communications officer. Admiral Lee nodded. "Any sign they've detected us?" There was a moment of silence as the sensors worked. Then Lieutenant Jun at the tactical station straightened up. "Sir, they've seen us. They're deploying interceptors," he reported, pointing to his screen. 3 waves, standard hive mind pattern. Just as intelligence predicted. On the view screen, small black shapes began to pour from the larger Krell ships. They moved in perfect lines, like beads on a string. Admiral Lee turned to Gina. "Commander Park, the Vanguard Squadron is yours." Gina nodded and stepped to the command station. She pressed the communications button. "This is Commander Park to all Vanguard ships. Prepare to initiate Operation Chaos on my mark." 12 ships acknowledged her order. These were the smallest and fastest in the Earth fleet, each carrying only 100 crew members. They had been specially trained for this moment. Gina took a deep breath. "Mark." As one, the 12 ships suddenly broke from the main formation. But instead of moving together in a coordinated attack pattern, each ship took off in a different direction. Some dove toward the planet. Others spun in tight spirals or zigzagged at seemingly random angles. There was no pattern, no predictable movement at all. On the tactical display, Lieutenant Jun tracked the Krell response. The perfect lines of interceptors began to break apart as they tried to adjust to the chaotic movement of the Earth ships. "It's working," Jun said with a note of surprise. "Their formation is breaking down." Admiral Lee allowed himself a small smile. The Krell hive mind thinks in patterns. Their tactics are based on mathematical precision. They've never faced an enemy who deliberately acts chaotically. Jaina watched as her Vanguard ships continued their random movements, drawing the Krell interceptors into a confused tangle. Some of the small enemy ships actually collided with each other as they tried to adjust to the unpredictable maneuvers. "Vanguard Group has engaged the enemy," she reported. "The Krell interceptors are scattered. Main fleet has a clear path to the station." Admiral Lee nodded. "All ships, advance on the outpost." Sunspear vessels moved to firing positions. The Indomitable and 11 other large warships began to move forward. These were the ships equipped with the experimental Valoran weapons. The rest of the fleet spread out to protect them. As they approached, the larger Krell cruisers began to move to intercept them. These were fearsome ships, each one twice the size of an Earth destroyer. Their hulls were black crystal, shaped like arrowheads, with weapons protruding from every surface. "Krell cruisers are powering up weapons," reported Lieutenant Jun. "Their shields are at maximum." Admiral Lee pressed a button on his chair. "Dr. Tak, is Sunspear ready?" The scientist's voice came through the speaker, tense but excited. "Ready, Admiral. All 12 systems are fully charged. Targeting computers are locked on the lead Krell cruiser. Fire when ready, Doctor." Jaina held her breath. The survival of Earth might depend on what happened in the next few seconds. If Sunspear failed, the Krell shields would make their ships nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. Sunspear active, Dr. Tak announced over the comm. A strange blue-white beam shot out from the Indomitable's main gun. It didn't look like a normal weapon blast, more like a stream of liquid light. The beam struck the lead Krell cruiser directly on its forward shield. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The beam appeared to stop at the shield, spreading out across the invisible barrier in ripples of blue energy. Then the effect began. The shield didn't just fail, it changed. The quantum energy that had protected the ship began to collapse inward, the ripples moving faster and faster toward the ship itself. When the energy reached the black hull, it didn't stop. It continued inward, pulling the outer layers of the ship with it. The Krell cruiser seemed to fold in on itself, its hull crumpling like paper being crushed by an invisible hand. A bright flash of light burst from within the ship as its power core was compressed beyond its limits. When the light faded, only a cloud of debris remained where the mighty cruiser had been. A moment of stunned silence filled the bridge of the Indomitable *. "It worked," whispered June. "It actually worked." 11 more blue-white beams shot out from the Earth fleet. 11 more Krell cruisers imploded in spectacular flashes of light and debris. The smaller Krell ships began to break formation, moving in confused patterns. Without the hive mind direction from the cruisers, they seemed lost. "The telepaths are engaging," reported Lieutenant Hanna's voice over the comm. "We're disrupting their communication network. The interceptors can't coordinate their attacks." Earth's fighters pounced on the confused enemy ships. Laser fire and missiles tore through the disorganized Krell formation. Ships that had been feared throughout the galaxy were now being destroyed by the dozens. "Admiral," called the communications officer, "we're intercepting Krell transmissions. Our translators are processing them now." A series of high-pitched sounds played through the bridge speakers, gradually resolving into words. "Emergency. Earth attack. Defenses failing. Request immediate reinforcement. Summon the Grand Armada." The bridge fell silent again. The Grand Armada was the main Krell battle fleet, hundreds of ships strong. If it arrived, the Earth forces would be vastly outnumbered. "How long do we have?" Admiral Lee asked. "Based on known Krell hyperspace capabilities and their last reported position," said Lieutenant Jun, 18 hours at most. Gina looked at the tactical display. The battle around Gamma 9 was nearly over. The station itself was defenseless now, its guard ships destroyed. They had achieved their first victory faster than anyone had dared hope. But it would mean nothing if the Grand Armada arrived before they could prepare. "We need to decide quickly," Admiral Lee said, looking around the bridge. "Do we retreat with what we've learned, or push deeper into Krell territory, while they're still recovering from this shock?" Gina looked at the view screen, where the remains of the Krell ships still drifted in space. For the first time in history, the Krell had been defeated in battle. The Valorans had been avenged, at least in part. But the war was far from over. Silence filled the bridge of the Indomitable *. Every officer stared at Admiral Lee, waiting for the order they expected, the order to retreat. They had won an impossible victory at Outpost Gamma 9, proving Earth's new weapons worked against the feared Krell shields. Logic said they should withdraw now, prepare for the coming battle with the Grand Armada. But Admiral Lee was not looking at his tactical display. Instead, he studied a small silver pin in his palm, the friendship emblem given to him by the Valoran High Council 20 years ago. "Sir," Lieutenant Jun said quietly, "the Grand Armada will reach this position in under 18 hours. We should begin withdrawal preparations." Admiral Lee closed his fist around the pin and looked up. His eyes were clear and determined. "No," he said. "We press forward, while they're disorganized." The bridge crew froze. Commander Gina Park stepped closer to the Admiral. "Forward, sir," she asked. "You mean deeper into Krell territory?" "I mean to their core worlds," Lee said, his voice stronger now. to the Krell throne world itself. Gasps filled the bridge. The Krell throne world, Crystallos, was the center of their empire, a heavily defended planet where the Imperator and the central hive mind resided. No alien species had ever approached it and survived. "Admiral," said the navigation officer, "that's 6 hours at maximum speed, through 3 defended systems." "Then we'd better hurry," Lee replied. "The Grand Armada is being recalled to protect their throne. If we strike now, we can reach it before their defenses are ready." He turned to the communications station. "Send orders to all ships. We advance immediately to Crystallos." As the orders went out, Jinna pulled the Admiral aside. "Sir, with respect, this is extremely risky." Lee nodded. "That's exactly why it will work, Commander. The Krell cannot understand why we would do this. Their strategic calculations say we should retreat and consolidate our victory. And because we're not doing what they expect. It creates confusion in the hive mind," Lee finished, "which gives us our best chance." Within minutes, the Earth fleet was underway, pushing deeper into Krell territory at maximum speed. The 12 ships with Sunspear weapons took the lead, while the others formed a protective screen around them. They passed the remains of Outpost Gamma 9, now a cloud of crystal fragments drifting in space. 3 hours into their journey, they encountered a small Krell patrol. 4 obsidian ships moved to intercept them, but they were destroyed by Sunspear before they could even report the Earth fleet's position. In the telepathy center aboard the Indomitable Asterisk, Lieutenant Hannah sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by her team. Their eyes were closed, their minds linked through special devices developed for this mission. Sweat beaded on their foreheads as they reached out with their thoughts, searching for the patterns of the Krell hive mind. Commander Jinna entered quietly, not wanting to break their concentration. Hannah sensed her presence anyway and opened her eyes. "Commander," she said, her voice tired but excited, "we're picking up something unusual." "What is it?" Jinna asked. "Confusion," Hannah said. "Widespread confusion throughout the Krell network. They cannot comprehend vengeance. Their concept of warfare is purely transactional: resources, territory, advantage. The idea that we would risk everything just to punish them for attacking our allies. It makes no sense to them. Can you use that?" Hannah nodded. "We're projecting images of the destroyed Valoran worlds into their network. Emotions of anger, grief, determination. It's like injecting chaos into their ordered system." Jinna squeezed Hannah's shoulder. "Keep it up. We'll need every advantage." 5.5 hours after leaving Gamma 9, the Earth fleet approached Crystallos. The Krell throne world was a beautiful but alien sight, a planet that seemed made entirely of crystal, its surface reflecting the light of its sun in rainbow patterns. Orbiting the planet were dozens of defense stations and at least 30 large warships. "The Grand Armada hasn't arrived yet," reported Lieutenant June, "but these defense forces are still substantial." Admiral Lee called a final briefing in the war room. Officers from key sections gathered around the holographic display of Crystallos. "We can't fight all those ships conventionally," Lee said. "Even with Sunspear, we're outnumbered. So we'll use a different approach." He nodded to Dr. Tak, who stepped forward. The scientist looked exhausted but proud. "I've developed a quantum virus based on the same principles as Sunspear," Tak explained. "Instead of attacking their shields, it attacks the communication systems that link the hive mind together. If placed inside their central command nexus, it could temporarily sever the connections between all Krell in the system." "How temporarily?" Jinna asked. "Hours, maybe a day," Tak admitted. "Not long, but enough time to force terms." "How do we get it inside their command nexus?" asked Lieutenant June. Admiral Lee turned to Jinna. "That's where Commander Park comes in." Jinna felt all eyes turn to her. She'd suspected this was coming. "I'll leave a small team to infiltrate the main command station," she said, "while our fleet engages their outer defenses as a distraction." 2 hours later, Jinna sat in a small stealth shuttle with 5 other officers. Each wore a special suit designed to mask their heat signatures and disrupt scanning beams. The shuttle itself was covered in experimental Valoran technology that bent light around its hull, making it nearly invisible. "Launching in 3 minutes," said the pilot. "The main fleet is beginning their attack run." Through the view screen, Gina watched as the Earth ships moved toward Crystallos in a bold frontal assault. Sunspear beams lashed out, destroying 2 Krell defense platforms immediately. The remaining Krell ships moved to intercept, exactly as planned. "Now," she ordered. The stealth shuttle slipped away from the Indomitable Asterisk, moving on a curved path toward the largest structure in orbit around Crystallos, the command nexus. It was a massive crystal sphere, with spikes protruding in all directions. Inside that sphere was the physical network that connected the Krell hive mind. "No signs they've detected us," whispered the pilot as they approached a small docking port near the bottom of the sphere. The team moved quickly after docking, using hand signals rather than speaking. The interior of the command nexus was strange. Corridors made of the same black crystal as Krell ships, pulsing with inner light. Few Krell moved through these halls. Most remained connected to control stations, their crystal bodies plugged directly into the network. Gina checked the small device in her hand, a map created from Valoran intelligence. They needed to reach 5 key junction points and place Tux virus transmitters at each one. The team split up. Gina took the most dangerous route, toward the central chamber where the Krell Imperator itself might be present. The corridors became wider as she moved deeper into the nexus, the pulsing lights brighter. Twice she had to press herself into shadows as Krell guards passed by, tall, crystalline beings that moved with perfect mechanical precision. Finally, she reached the junction. It was a large room with crystal pillars connecting floor to ceiling, each one humming with energy. This was one of the main nodes of the hive mind network. Gina quickly placed the small black device against the central pillar and activated it. The device seemed to melt into the crystal, becoming part of it. One by one, her team reported success from their positions. All 5 transmitters were in place. "Activate the virus on my mark," Gina ordered through her communicator. 3, 2, 1, mark. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the lights in the corridor began to flicker. The humming sound that had filled the nexus changed pitch, becoming erratic. A high-pitched sound, like crystal breaking, echoed through the halls. Gina ran back toward the docking port, hearing chaos erupting around her. Krell guards stumbled in the corridors, their movements no longer coordinated. Some collapsed entirely, their crystalline forms going dark, as they lost connection to the hive mind. Outside in space, the effect was even more dramatic. Krell ships suddenly lost formation, drifting aimlessly or making random course changes. Several collided with each other. Others began firing weapons in all directions, hitting their own vessels more often than Earth ships. The hive mind had shattered, and for the first time in their existence, individual Krell had to think for themselves. Most couldn't handle it. "Get back to the shuttle," Gina ordered her team. Phase 1 complete. The Earth ships formed a wide circle around Crystallos, their weapons aimed at the crystal planet below. The Krell defense fleet drifted in confusion, ships moving randomly without purpose. Some had crashed into each other. Others fired weapons at nothing. The quantum virus had worked even better than expected. Commander Gina Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Asterisk, watching the screens with Admiral Lee and the other officers. Her stealth team had returned safely from their mission. Now they waited to see what would happen next. "Status report," Admiral Lee ordered. Lieutenant Jun checked his screens before answering. "The Krell fleet is completely disorganized. Our telepaths report massive confusion in their network. The virus has spread to 90% of their systems." "And the Grand Armada?" "Still 4 hours away, sir." Admiral Lee nodded and turned to Gina. "Your team did excellent work, Commander. Now we see if they're smart enough to surrender." "Will they understand the concept?" Gina asked. Their hive mind has never faced defeat before. Before the Admiral could answer, Lieutenant Jun straightened in his chair. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's the Krell Imperator." Silence fell across the bridge. In all recorded history, no alien species had ever communicated directly with the Krell ruler. The Imperator remained hidden in the depths of crystals, guiding the hive mind from safety. "Put it on the main screen," Admiral Lee ordered. The view screen flickered, and an image appeared that made several officers gasp. The Krell Imperator was unlike any Krell they had seen before. Where normal Krell were tall, roughly humanoid crystal structures, the Imperator resembled an enormous crystalline spider. Its body was a complex arrangement of black and purple crystal, easily 3 meters across. 8 long limbs extended from the central mass, each ending in sharp points. Most disturbing were its eyes. Not 2, but dozens of faceted surfaces that covered the front of its body, reflecting light in prismatic patterns. "This is Admiral Lee of the Earth Defense Fleet," Lee said calmly. "Do you surrender?" The translation system processed the Imperator's response, converting the high-pitched crystal sounds into human language. "Surrender is not a concept in Krell understanding," the Imperator stated, its voice buzzing through the speakers. "Combat continues until resources are depleted or objective is achieved." Admiral Lee frowned. "Then let me be clear. Your forces are defeated. Your hive mind is disrupted. The Grand Armada will not arrive in time to save your throne world. If you do not cease hostilities immediately, we will destroy Christos." The many eyes of the Imperator seemed to pulse with inner light. "Your species fights beyond statistical probability," it stated. "The Valorans cannot aid you, yet you risk extinction for them. This defies logical analysis." Gina stepped forward. "May I respond, Admiral?" Lee nodded, and Gina addressed the alien ruler. "The Valorans are our friends," she said simply. "They would have done the same for us." For several seconds, the Imperator remained completely still. Its crystalline structure shifted slightly, as though the creature was physically processing this information. "Friendship," it finally said. "A concept we have studied, but not experienced. It creates irrational behavior patterns that cannot be predicted by our models." "It makes us stronger," Gina replied. "Not weaker." The Imperator's many eyes pulsed again. "Evidence suggests this is accurate. You have achieved what no species has done in 10,000 cycles. You have reached Christos. You have disrupted the unity of Krell thought." There was another long pause. "What are your demands?" Admiral Lee stepped forward again. "Our terms are non-negotiable. First, immediate withdrawal from all Valoran territory. Second, reparations to help rebuild what you destroyed. Third, recognition of Earth as protector of the Valoran people. Fourth, a permanent treaty that prevents future Krell aggression against either of our species. These terms require significant resource allocation," the Imperator stated. "The alternative is destruction," Lee said firmly. "Your choice." The bridge crew held their breath as the Imperator considered. The alien's crystal body changed colors slowly, shifting from dark purple to blue, then back again. "We accept these terms," it finally said. "Krell forces will withdraw. Resources will be allocated for Valoran reconstruction. Earth protection status is acknowledged." A cheer started to rise from the bridge crew, but Admiral Lee raised his hand for silence. "You will sign a formal treaty," he said to the Imperator. "Representatives from Earth, the surviving Valorans, and the Krell will meet on neutral territory to finalize the agreement." "This is acceptable," the Imperator responded. Communication ends. The screen went dark. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the bridge erupted in cheers and applause. Officers hugged each other. Some cried openly. They had achieved the impossible. Victory against the most feared species in the galaxy. Admiral Lee turned to Gina, a rare smile on his weathered face. "Congratulations, Commander Park. The Valorans have been avenged." Gina nodded, but she felt strangely empty. Victory didn't bring back the billions of dead Valorans. It didn't restore their shattered worlds. 3 days later, representatives gathered on an asteroid base near the border between Earth and Krell space. A temporary structure had been erected for the signing ceremony. The Krell had sent 3 tall crystal beings, each one carrying a piece of the Imperator's own structure to show the importance of the treaty. Earth was represented by Admiral Lee and several high-ranking officials. And the Valorans had sent the few survivors they could gather on short notice. Gina watched from the side of the room as the treaty was formally accepted by all parties. The terms were exactly as Admiral Lee had demanded. The Krell would withdraw. They would pay reparations. They would never again threaten the Valorans or humans. After the ceremony, a Valoran approached Gina slowly. She recognized Ambassador Talon, though he was changed from when she'd last seen him. His silver skin was now dull and scarred. One of his 6 limbs was missing entirely, the stump covered with a metallic cap. His large eyes, once bright blue, were now clouded with pain. "Commander Park," he said in the musical Valoran language, "you were his friend." Gina knew he was speaking of his son. "Yes, Ambassador. I was honored to know him. He believed humans were special," Talon said quietly. "That your kind had something unique in the galaxy, a strength beyond your technology or numbers." The Valoran paused. He was right. Talon reached out with 3 of his remaining upper limbs and gently touched Gina's shoulder. It was the Valoran gesture of deepest gratitude and respect, normally reserved only for their most honored leaders. "My people are few now," he said, "but we will rebuild, and we will never forget what Earth has done for us." Gina felt tears in her eyes, but did not wipe them away. "We are friends," she said simply. "That's what friends do." As she looked out the viewport at the stars, Gina thought they seemed to shine brighter than before. Humanity had entered the galactic stage, not as conquerors seeking power or resources, but as defenders of justice. They had risked everything for friendship, for loyalty, for what was right. And the universe, it seemed, had noticed. The end.